Glory to Jesus Christ. Welcome again to Oriental Lumen Television and our series on Seeing with Both Eyes. And as you recall, there's an intended pun there. Not only seeing with eyes, but two I words. Incarnationally and integratedly. This is the vision of the Church East and West, especially the Catholic and Orthodox traditions, because they are sacramentally based traditions. So we see the invisible God incarnated and fleshed, made visible through his physical order of creation, but we see then how everything is integrated together. All of creation, heaven and earth, liturgy, the human person, and every discipline in life. Everything in life is approached with this vision. That's the vision of iconography. That's why icons are so significant, they're so therapeutic, and they are essential and relevant to our lives today, as they have been for centuries. You know, there are certain things that are good for all times and never become old-fashioned. Just because they originated a long time ago doesn't mean that now they're out of date or old-fashioned. And this is part of the genius of iconography, of that art form. It is good for all times. Not just because it's art for art's sake, although as we've said over and over again, iconography really does require artistic ability, and it incorporates the finest, most sophisticated principles of art and beauty. So it's not, but yet it's not just art for art's sake. It is art as a vehicle for communicating this vision, for literally not only communicating, but drawing us into this vision. When we look at icons, we're being drawn into that other reality. But it's also being drawn into the truth about this life here. You know, icons are both a window to eternity, but at the same time they're also a bit of a mirror. They're showing us the truth about what's here, about the incarnation, about the sanctity of this world, of this earth, of creation. And being able to have that vision and apply that to every aspect of life makes all the difference in the world. And this is why we have to feed ourselves visually on iconography. One of the other important things about iconography is we've mentioned how there should be seen and understood in their context of art and a vision and as a lifestyle. But also icons are primarily set in a church. Now, yes, we have icons in our homes on the wall, which we should. In fact, we should have an icon corner. It's a specific area we gather, especially as a family or household, to pray with the icon there and a little candle in front of it and maybe scripture there and so on. So an icon corner is important for our homes, to have icons in different places where we work and so on. I even keep one on my computer. This is fine. This is good. But it's also important to understand that icons ideally and originally are set in the context of a church. They're on the walls of a church, on the icon screen, on the ceiling, and so on. And again, this is important because we keep cautioning here in this series that we cannot see icons because they're growing in popularity, which and focus, attention, which is good, but you have to be careful that we don't approach them as a craft or as an art for art's sake. It's all about their context. Their context. I can't emphasize that enough. Their context in the church, in the liturgy, as an art form, as a lifestyle for those who view it and create them, and as a means to communicate this fundamental vision of life, this sacramental vision. So context is important. One of the forms that is used in iconography are the forms of good art, as we've been saying, especially compositionally. And sometimes the composition is something you look at that you don't necessarily see right away. It's sort of playing on your subconscious, just like a beautiful piece of music, a song that you like. You can't really say why you like it unless you're a really an educated musician. You can maybe take it apart and explain the elements of audio beauty. So icons kind of play on the conscious and subconscious dimensions of our mind, which is good, which is okay. That's part of how they affect us and transform us. So let's look at some of the icons again to see some of their magic. Here we have the icons of the crucifixion and the resurrection of Christ. We're going to look at these two together. Again, let's look at the composition. What do we see here? Well, we see a very obvious, here's the icon of the crucifixion. We see a very obvious composition of a strong verticality going slashing right through the middle of this picture plane, and of course a very strong horizontal. So you've got the cross right there. In fact, you can squint at that and you've got this cross shape right there, very, very clear against the light background, the gold background. And by the way, iconography uses gold in the background or just a solid color. It doesn't make atmospheric kinds of impressions. So like as in secular art, as beautiful as that is for secular art, it does not make that kind of dimension. Icons try to communicate a dimensionlessness, in other words, without dimension, because they're pointing to, they're integrating us into some of the next life, which is eternal. It has no dimension, as we see here on earth. And so a gold background, when you have a solid gold background, for instance, in these icons, they're gold. This one has a kind of goldish color, but it can also be a solid color, like a blue oftentimes is used, sometimes a deep, brilliant red. Most of the time it's blue or it's gold. The gold, if you look at this, you think to yourself, okay, how far away is that? Is that a background? Is that a wall? Is it close? Is it far? Is it miles and miles away? Is it real close? Is it right smack behind him? Is he up against it like a wall? You don't know. There is no dimension. And that's one of the reasons why it uses gold. Gold also carries a symbol of kingliness, of royalty, of preciousness, of this precious life beyond, of eternity, of heaven. So that's another reason why gold is used. And usually in icons it's actual gold, usually like 23 karat gold that's applied to the surface. Or it can be, as I mentioned, a solid color. Many ways the icon will throw dimension off as we know it, but it also uses a lot geometry, the geometrics of a visual picture plane. Okay, first we had this, as I mentioned. Now I want you to look again, squint at this icon, and look at what's happening here. Look at where the light areas are. They come straight up along this vertical axis, and then they fan out. They fan out in a way that's echoing the fanning out, the stretching out of Christ's arms. See that? So it takes your eye, and it's leading you up like this, as if you're being embraced and caught up into Christ's embrace. So your eye just automatically works this way. It moves up and it spreads out as if you're being caught up into Christ's own gesture of spreading his arms out on the cross, not just in suffering. And again, there's that both and dimension we talked about. The both and. There's always two things or more going on, always two at least, going on in the icons. The suffering of Christ, stretched on the cross, the humiliation, yes, but also that was an embrace of love. It's like he's saying to the whole world, see what you've done to me, for all I've done to you. You have betrayed me, you have hurt me, you have disobeyed me. Well, I'm going to get even with you. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to embrace you with ultimate love. I'm going to give my body to you. I'm going to die for you. That's how I'm going to pay you back for your insolence. I'm going to love you like you've never known love before. And those arms outstretched are an embrace. So you see, we move up and out and get caught up in that embrace. We also, again, have some triangular patterns here. See, like this. And also the hieratic and then the narrative. See how it's almost divided in half. The lower part with all the movement. Look at these heads. You notice that oftentimes in these heads, you'll see that in the icon of the resurrection as well. We'll get to that in a moment. These heads, there's kind of like this kind of movement going on. Like this, you notice? This head is leaning that way, that head's that way, that head's that way, that head's that way. It's kind of like back and forth, back and forth. And what that creates is a sense of movement, like this. Your eye sees this, 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 this. Your eye's going like this, you see? So it's trying to maintain, establish that there's lots of movement here. People puzzled, people mourning, people trying to understand things, people in different postures of human experience, because they're trying to contemplate this mystery. But look, this is very static, very much at rest, very straight. The hieratic and the narrative. This always in process, just like you and me, but this always perfect. Now, here we see Jesus on the cross, but notice he does something in the posture. You can follow the pointer here. Go from his head this way, and you go down the axis of the body. See that way, then it turns back this way. What the iconographer has done is incorporated one of the most common, effective, beautiful motifs in art, in composition, the S-curve. The beautiful S-curve. You see? Something goes this way, back that way, back that way. An S-curve is repeated many times. Look at the arms. The S-curve, see, it goes this way, then it turns back in, then it turns back out. So even though there's a verticality there, there's still a very graceful, beautiful visual rhythm here of his body in that classic S curve. Now look at these figures here. John, notice how he's standing. There's a great S curve there. See that? See his position as S curve, echoing this S curve. But his S curve is denoting someone that's contemplating, someone that's almost like sad and depressed, like he's sort of like slumped a little bit. He's in contemplation and also in grief, just utter amazement at what is happening as he stands there at the cross. Notice, though, the Mother of God. Not only is she more erect, but she's actually even leaning in a bit towards God, towards Christ. And here the women are trying to comfort her, trying to almost like hold her back from going to him. Again, both and. Why is she like this? Well, she's the grieving mother. You see this hand? Look at that hand. Against her face, the grieving mother. And the liturgical texts in the Byzantine Church on Holy and Great Friday are very, very moving. In fact, we even have very moving hymns. One of them is even called The Grieving Mother. When you listen to that hymn, it would make anybody cry, especially a mother. It's the voice of the Virgin Mary from her heart speaking to her son as he's on the cross. It's just all the human drama you could possibly imagine. But it doesn't stay there. Remember, it's always both and. Iconography never lets us stay just in the human experience. She is leaning towards him, almost like going to him to comfort him in her grief, and this woman is holding her back. At the same time, she's going to him because she is affirming that she understands his mission, that he has to die on this cross and save humanity. He has to become the new Adam and she the new Eve. And so her body is tilted that way, motioning our view towards this reality. And also, look at her hand. It's a hand of acceptance and of blessing. So, the human grief, and yet that acceptance, that understanding of what's really behind all this, the why behind all this, that she understands the mission of her son. Both those things are happening at the same time within her. And so her posture is not only erect, unlike John's, it's not only erect, but it's also moving in the direction of Christ. And there you see the difference in the direction of the heads of the other women. See, all of them are much more in motion in this narrative. She, of course, because she's the mother of God, she's full of grace, she understands. She grieves, understands at the same time. So her posture is going to be different. He is the new Adam who looks down upon the new Eve and says to his mother, not mother, but woman, behold your son. Woman, behold your son. The only time he called her woman was at the wedding of Cana, his first miracle. And he said to her, woman, my hour is not yet come. There's a reference in an event of a wedding. He calls her the woman, which is, who else was called woman? Eve. He's calling her in a sense Eve. And he says, my hour is not yet come. That hour would come here on the cross when he would finally consummate the mystical marriage between the new Adam and the new Eve. And the human race would be reconceived, symbolized by her son now, by John, her new mystical spiritual son. The new Adam and the new Eve. Now his hour is come. And there on the cross is the mystical marriage being conceived, being consummated, the human race being reconceived mystically. You have to think mystically, which is why the next, on the third day, our next icon, the next event, is the resurrection, in which in the liturgical text, again, liturgical text coincides with the iconography, where we will sing resoundingly in the Byzantine church on Easter, on Pascha, Christ emerges from the tomb like a bridegroom from the bridal chamber and fills the women with joy. Having consummated the mystical marriage and reconceived the human race, the new Adam and the new Eve, it's like God is doing it over again because the first ones blew it. So he had to come up with a new Adam and a new Eve. He took on Adam himself, as no human being could be Adam again. But I will choose a human being to be the new Eve. And together we will mystically reconceive the human race. This is all about a spousal marriage, that spousal mystery, that spousal love between God and us. In fact, during this week of this event, we call it in the Byzantine liturgical calendar the week of the bridegroom. The bridegroom is coming for what? He's coming to his bride to reconceive, to consummate the marriage.
Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah,
Much more to be said about this icon, but let's move again now to the resurrection icon. What iconography does a lot is it has a continuity, integration of images and symbols. One of the things it carries through in a number of icons, especially in this event here, these two events, is this little dark area here, darkness, the abyss. What's happening here? There's a darkness, and look at this. There's a cross, 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 darkness, darkness. In fact, we see that darkness in the nativity icon, and we see Christ against that darkness. So what's happening in the darkness area? In the darkness here, there you see a skull. That's the skull of Adam. Where is this happening? In the middle of the earth, as we say in the liturgical text. And where is Christ? Right here in the middle of the scene. There's the darkness in the middle. This represents the world darkened by sin. These are supposedly, symbolically, the bones of Adam. Because here's the old Adam who brought death into the world because of sin. Here's the new Adam, right above him, right in that same spot. So you see what God is doing in his brilliant plan? He's going right to where everything took place. He's going right to the same spot, even with the same materials. The wood of a tree. It was through the wood of a tree that they fell. Now it was through the wood of the tree that the new Adam would redeem the earth, would redeem the old Adam. And so there's Adam in the dark abyss. And here do we have, once again, here's Adam in the dark abyss. Well, this time, redemption, redemption. There's Jesus Christ descending into hell. This is called the harrowing of hell. See, in the Eastern liturgy, in the Eastern iconography, we do not depict Christ's resurrection because no one actually saw the actual resurrection. They saw afterwards. And before the resurrection, as we say in the liturgical text, Christ went into a Sabbath rest. In other words, he went into Hades to do battle. In fact, one of the most magnificent services, one of the richest services in the whole Byzantine liturgical life is the Jerusalem Matins, which are prayed on Saturday morning. It's a service which takes us down with Christ in a most dramatic and poetic way, theological way, into that harrowing of hell, where he goes down into hell and he destroys the power of hell. There you see the locks and hinges being broken, the barriers of hell. And as he smashes them down, lo and behold, they end up in the form of a cross. How about that? So the cross, again, is the sign, the instrument of victory over the devil. And he's rescuing Adam and Eve out of Hades. They seem to be in, again, sarcophagus, because they were dead to eternal life until Christ came and paid the ransom, paid the price. Here you see in this icon, in this rendition of the resurrection, here you see it's very dramatic. The movement, you see Christ, his clothes like flurrying in the breeze, like there's this tremendous slashing action. You can see him just slashing into the picture here, descending down into hell with all this motion, all this commotion going on, grabbing Adam and saying, "Adam, grab my hand," and Eve. And in fact, in this icon here, and I'll just move these out of the way for 1 second here. In this icon, one of my favorite renditions, this is from what is known as the Kora Museum in Istanbul. Here you see, it's a bit small, but you can see, here's a very dramatic rendition. There's the gates of hell being smashed down. He's grabbing here Adam and Eve. See, here's very clearly their sarcophagus, their tombs, pulling them up out of hell and raising them up with him. And raising not only Adam and Eve, but they of course represent all humanity. In fact, all humanity. Here on either side of him, you see members from the Old Testament figures, including St. John, who's the transition between the Old and the New Testament, St. John the Baptist, and then the saints from the New Testament. In other words, no one could enter heaven yet until Christ came and broke the power of hell and released the captives that were held captive in Hades. So we call this the harrowing of hell. Very, very dramatic rendition and depiction. Now, also, in these renditions of the resurrection, we see again compositionally. You see here's the nimbus, which really accentuates Christ, his brilliance, his power. There's that diagonal Here's the horizontal. Here's the vertical. Look at this diagonal. Look at this diagonal. See how it's, again, once again we have a triangular shape hidden in there. Geometric patterns that are put together in a way that creates this unity and this flow. Now over here, you've got this great open space here. You see how it converges down like this and highlights Christ's face? So you see, it's almost like it's encompassing him. It's like bringing our view, once again, a kind of a triangular shape, bringing our view, focusing right down into here where the main action is. And there he is, grabbing Adam, and eventually, is in the other icon, Eve as well. Symbolic of raising us all up, saving us all, humanity. And there you see, once again, as in many icons, the bright light from Christ, tinging, highlighting the rocks, the mountains here of the caves of Hades, of the great abyss. Eve, you see her in the red, very much reminiscent of a red that is used even in the Virgin Mary, because again she is the new Eve. So we have then these similarities, the cross in the abyss, in the resurrection, and the crucifixion of Christ. So you see again this element of integration of iconography. It'll use similar patterns. It'll cross over some of the imagery, such as the cross, the abyss. It will use many similar kinds of geometric patterns to again lead the eye in the way that will communicate or immerse us into its message, into its mystery, into the narrative, which is just not only a narrative, a historical event, but has a theological significance that is good for all time. This is why iconography tries to be so very timeless in its portrayal. Notice one other thing here, a couple other things here. Right here, as I talked about before, the dimensionlessness of iconography. Well, it does it even with what we call an inverse perspective. When you look down, say for instance down railroad tracks, any kind of parallel lines, or down a street, you look way down a straight street, the street seems to get closer and converge as it gets further away. Well, iconography reverses that. If you notice, like here, it tends to make the lines actually open up as they go away from you. The reason for that is iconography is saying that as we stand here and look into the mystery with our sacramental glasses, the mystery that the icons are immersing us into, our vision broadens, it widens. We see into eternity. We see the big picture. We see as God intended us to see, the big picture, the broad picture, the true reality, the mystical reality. So our vision, as we look into this mystery, our vision only continues to grow and expand, not get smaller. A vision of life, a sophisticated art form that uses the principles of beauty, and a lifestyle for those who see icons, pray with them, and who create them. This is the context of iconography, and also in its liturgy, the art and the architecture of the church. Glory to Jesus Christ.